So now that we understand some of the basics of Terraform and how to use its configuration file and the basic syntax of Terraform to create resources, fetch data, create variables, and so on, let's actually now see some realistic use case with Terraform and AWS. So what we're going to do is we're going to deploy an EC2 instance, a virtual server on AWS, and we're going to run a simple Docker container on it. However, in order to create that instance, we're going to create the whole infrastructure on AWS. So first, we're going to need an own VPC. So we're going to create our own VPC instead of using the default one from the region. Inside our VPC, we're going to create one subnet in one of the availability zones. Note that we can create multiple subnets in each AZ. In our case, we're just going to create one subnet in one of the AZs, right? Because we just want a simple use case with one server. And we're going to connect this VPC to internet using Internet Gateway on AWS. So basically, we want to allow traffic to and from VPC with internet, right? So outside of VPC, we want to be able to connect to our EC2 server inside VPC or resources, and we want requests to go out to internet. And then in this configured VPC, inside the subnet that we create, we're going to deploy our EC2 instance. And this EC2 instance will basically run a very simple Docker container. We're going to deploy Nginx Docker container on it. And because we want to simulate kind of web application deployment on EC2 server, we're going to want to access it from the browser, right? And that means that we're going to need to open firewall rules in order to access the Nginx server running on the EC2. And we also want to SSH into our server, and that means we're going to open the SSH port on the server as well. And for that, we're going to create a security group with those two ports configured, right? So we're going to open up these ports through security group. So we're going to do all of this one by one. Now, it may sound like we're doing a lot because we're creating a lot of components to deploy a simple server inside. However, when you have a multi-server deployment, basically you just have to create this whole network and infrastructure configuration once. So you basically have just one VPC, maybe multiple subnets, and you just deploy all the servers inside. And generally, when working with AWS command line interface or even management console, you can create the EC2 instances in the default VPC that comes out of the box with every region, right? So you don't have to create a new VPC and a new subnet to launch your EC2 instance there. However, in Terraform, it is a best practice to create new resources rather than use the default components that AWS provides us with. So that also when we clean up all the resources, basically we can remove the components that we created because we can't remove the default VPC component from AWS. So that means that we want to create our own VPC, we want to work with our own VPC and leave the default one basically as is. We're not going to make any changes inside. So with that overview, let's actually get started.